Hey everybody, this is Lonnie Sweet from the Sweet Management Group, and you are either listening to or watching the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast, where we talk to sales executives from the culinary, sports, general business, and entertainment worlds about their journey, about being a salesperson in this industry and what it took to get to where they are today. So whether you're listening in your earbuds, you're sitting in front of your computer, I appreciate you stopping by and hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome to the Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast. My name is Lonnie Sweet. I'm the CEO of Sweet Management Group, formerly called the Connect Group. This is our first podcast, and I think it's really awesome that I got my guy Russ Spielman on here with me for the first one because, man, he was there in the beginning, and I'm going to tell the story in a second, Russ, about coming down to New Jersey and just happening to be in your neighborhood and happening to stop in there. But Russ is, exactly, currently the founder and principal of GSE Worldwide. He's one of the best talent marketing sales guys in the business. He's been representing some of the best athletes in the world, like Bo Jackson, Steve Young, and I just saw him out in Vegas the other day at the draft where he's representing Sauce Gardner, who just got drafted to the New York Jets. He also represents Nick Mangold. And I think more importantly, Russ is just one of the better human beings that I've worked with over the years. And so this Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast is really about highlighting people's sales journeys and demystifying that word being a salesperson. And so for me, as I thought about my process and my journey, right, which is now 20 plus years, having you on first, man, was super important to me because of what you meant to me, as a young buck, and just kind of being a friend over the last 20 years, which is crazy to say. It's been a really long time. Just to have just to have fun and just talk about, you and kind of where you've been and kind of our journey together in this sales world, in this talent world. And so I really appreciate you coming on, man. I really do.
It's awesome. And, you never forget your first. So it's humbling to be your first.
Yeah.
And your journey is truly, it's one of my cocktail party stories. And actually, it's like a cocktail party story about how people should do this. That was when young kids were really aggressive and did whatever it took to get in. I don't know. I sound like the old man, get off my lawn, but
100%. So this, just for everybody that's listening to this, and I'm sure people that know me well enough have heard me say the story 50 times. I was working at the Tennis Hall of Fame at the time. I was kind of miserable in my job. I was looking for something new, and I literally did go down to an interview in Central Jersey to possibly go onto the Milk Tour and actually travel around the country and do an exhibit of the Milk Tour. And so Russ was, kind of pseudo friends with one of my cousin's husband, Justin. And I literally called him and was like, "Hey, Russ, I'm in the neighborhood." I was I don't know, an hour away in Central Jersey, driving back to Newport, Rhode Island. And I was like, "I'm in the neighborhood. Do you mind if I stop by?" And I could tell you, I still remember exactly what I'm wearing. I was wearing this stupid gold jacket or whatever the hell it was. And you're like, "Yeah, sure, come on by." And I remember I met with you and I met with Eric Bechtel. And I sat with Eric and I sat with you, and it was like, I was like just some schmuck kid, right? I remember I was like casual, I'm leaning back and I'm talking to Russ and blah, blah, blah. And little did you know, and I guess I wasn't smart enough to realize it at the time, I went to school for sports management, right? We both did. And SFX or ISI at the time really was starting to become the gold standard. So I didn't realize I wanted to get into talent. I didn't even know what the fuck that was, right? And so being able to meet you in that moment, I think it was on a Tuesday. I think you offered me the unpaid internship on a Thursday. And I started on that following Tuesday without a place to live, right? So thankfully I lived in a furnished apartment in Newport, Rhode Island. And I was driving a small silver Honda Civic. And I packed up my shit without a place to live and moved down to New Jersey, which, being a masshole that I am, I was like, New Jersey. But the only thing I knew was that my wife was from there, and I kept on coming back during college. Didn't have a place to live. Ended up meeting, Jim Tucker the second week that I was at ISI or SFX, and moved in with him. And the rest is history, man. It was it literally was one of those things where just I'm literally in your neighborhood, and it worked out.
My version of the story makes you sound even better, by the way. My version is that, the office is East Rutherford, New Jersey, which is pretty much near nothing except MetLife Stadium now,
right?
Meadowlands at the time. And you were in Newport, and you called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood," air quotes. and I'd love to stop by. And I said, wow, you're going to be in East Rutherford? Nobody's in East Rutherford. You got to come by. And then you hung up the phone and then you drove down and you got there in time for the meeting. That's my version of the story. Makes you
That
sound
is so
even
much
better.
better. That is so much better.
And then you
100%.
came and you sat in my office and you impressed me with your moxie and your gumption. And then I said, you gotta, dude, you came all the way down from Rhode Island. You got to meet some other people. You might have told me the truth at the time. And that's when I started walking you around the office to meet some people. So I think my version makes you sound even better, but I love it. And look, this business is, you got to do more than anyone else will. You just
100%.
have to, because now, especially nowadays, there's just, people are just dying to get into the business of doing whatever it takes to get the client.
You know, it's funny. You're just telling that story, and I'm thinking about our office in East Rutherford, and you know where just walking through those hallways, right? Like once you just walk through and around the corner, and you have the glass offices on the right, and like you had Ted Dalton was sitting outside of Frank Bruno's office, and you had Nelly was there, and like it was such an amazing. I'm getting chills thinking about it. It was such an amazing environment to start in. I feel so lucky. And I have so much gratitude to like being able to start there. Because when you think about all the people that left, right? All the people that really moved on from what was ISI and then 16W and SFX or wherever it may be, like it was a star-studded cast. I mean, I had dinner randomly with somebody last night who works for this company called Wonder, and she was telling me a story about Evan Frankel. Like she had just gotten tickets to the Rangers game from Evan Frankel. I was like, I don't think you realize how amazing Evan Frankel is and was. Like we would just like give him an idea and a deck would come out like 2 days later and it was like on a golden platform. And he was just like the deck messiah, right? He sat in the cube, and you had, Rini, is going to come on the podcast in a couple of weeks. She was down the hall working for the AFL, and you had Gabby Rowe, who was at the NLL. Like we just had so many amazing people, even you and Raskin and obviously Frank, and you had Emilio Collins and Zip. There was so much amazing energy that I feel really bad for this next generation, because most opportunities aren't like that anymore, right? You don't have the ability to be in an environment like this. Podcast is cool. Hopefully somebody learns something from it. It's not the same from being in it day in and day out. Right. No. And that I feel bad for kids. I really do.
Same. It's got to be unbelievably difficult and challenging. People just starting in this industry now. The energy in that place. And look, Fred, Frank, and Steve's coaching tree is all time. It's an all-time roster. And I'm fortunate that I got in there too. And it's just proliferated throughout the industry. And there was some unbelievable talent there. And just that energy and being around in those staff meetings and hearing and seeing and the activity, and it was wild. And I don't know how these young kids start now and build that Rolodex. They don't even call it a Rolodex anymore, but so I'm really that old man. But how you build that network of relationships when you're working remotely, you're working at home. So fortunately we're coming through COVID and people are getting out and meeting and greeting. But when I used to go to the memorabilia shows, I would walk around. Our secret sauce was just knowing how to get to people. So I would walk around and I'd walk up to athletes and I'd be like, hey, I'm in the business. This is what I do. I'd love to be able to bring some opportunities to you at some point. How do I get in touch with you? But I had that courage and then just aggressiveness to walk up to them and talk to people. And you have to be, and this damn thing, it's the best, worst thing ever, the phone.
I know.
But I was willing to just walk up to them and say, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm going to do stuff with you in the future. Just tell me how to get in touch with you.
Yeah. And before we get into that more, can you just tell a little bit about, your career path? Obviously you're at GC right now, and I know everything about where you came, but I think it's an interesting kind of, you've done a lot, right? You're at a big agency right now, but I hate the word entrepreneur, but I'm going to use it anyway. You're an entrepreneur and started your own business, right? So just, drop a little bit of just on your bio a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've run the gamut. Look, I'm a proud UMass alum, and, my fairy godmother, she hates when I say that, but Amy Ehrlich gave me an internship when I was in school. And I had the courage too. I took my first semester senior year to do an internship in New York City. And you know what? Losing half of your senior year was a big question. Was I willing to do that, or did I want to hang out and party? I had the forward thinkingness, if that's the right term, the foresight. I had the foresight to understand.
English was not your major.
Yeah. Exactly. I got a sign on my computer in the city, and it says, "Trust me that brains did not get me here." And it's like, you know what? Because it's hard work, and it's being willing to do whatever the other man or woman isn't willing to do. But Amy gave me that internship and that opportunity, and I seized it. And if the hours were 8 to 6, I was there 7 to 7. And Amy gave me that chance, and I worked hard, and then I was the right person at the right time. And when I went back to school, they offered me a job. And like you know, the bad part was, you know, I graduated on a Sunday and they wanted me to start Monday. So my first negotiation was, can I start Tuesday? And they said, okay. So I got a day off to drive home. And I went from from PSP was my first job. I had a little stint, too much to tell about here. I went from there, let's just skip over the other job, the sports media job. And I started begging Steve Rosner for a job. And Steve ended up hiring me, and again, doing whatever it took. I was living in Queens, driving to East Rutherford every day, and I took a huge pay cut to go do that. And I took a huge pay cut to go do that because I had the foresight, now I got the word, to look ahead and say, this is where the industry's going. This is what I want to do. I was on the buy side, and I said, and it's interesting enough, when I was at PSP, I was buying talent, meaning I was booking appearances, and I was doing events at the Super Bowl and the Final Four, and I was calling people like Steve Rosner saying, hey, Steve, I need talent to come to my party. And I recognized at a very young age, if I don't get into sales, I'm an expense, and my salary is going to max out. It probably maxed out at 22 if I don't start bringing in revenue. So when I saw this opportunity with Steve, I said, Steve, I'm on the buy side. I know what the buyers want, my 1 year of experience. I know what the buyers want. Let me come work for you and sell what you sell. And he took a chance on me, and I'm eternally grateful for that too. But I took a lot of sacrifices and went there and got in this amazing agency. And then, you know, they sold ISI to SFX, and SFX, you talk about coaching trees too. The people in that room, then I got the chance to suddenly I am working with a murderer's row of agents and agencies that all Robert Sillerman put under one roof. And that's when you get to know, and the talent level there and that whole thing, you know, and there were guys like Vino and people like that became CAA, and we're working with David Falk and Arn Tellem. Arn Tellem's, you know, group are literally Hall of Famers. Like, it's going to be Arn Tellem, Rob Pelinka, and Bob Myers. Those were 3 basketball agents in one office, right? So I'm working for those people. Those were the people that were giving me the opportunity to represent their athletes and bring opportunities to their basketball players and their baseball players. And I was working with Ben Dagra and Jim Steiner and, you know, Speakers of Sport and Fern Kuza and Diego Bentz and guys that were like real, and Alan and Randy Hendricks. Like, we had everybody. We had, you know, 10 Yankees probably when they're winning the World Series. We
had 900 clients at one point across the board. It was insane.
Everything. So I was just so fortunate. But then, you know, that runs the gamut. And then suddenly you're like, again, the same thing with sales. Like, I'm selling, but I'm selling for them. How do I sell for myself? You know, like, at some point you got to say, I got to just put my balls on the line and take a shot. I'm young enough. I didn't have a lot of expenses. You know, maybe one kid, but who cares, right? Like, I could take a shot. And fortunately, my wife had my back, and I had friends. My best friend runs a moving business. He goes, bro, take your shot. And if not, you got a job with me.
But so I remember, just real quick there, I remember actually doing side hustle moving jobs with you too, which was amazing.
Oh yeah. Look, when I was working for ISI, I was doing bar promotions because I needed money. And I had done this my whole life. And this is the stuff I'm trying to encourage my kids. Like, I was in college selling T-shirts, going door to door. I met a guy as a freshman who said, you want to sell T-shirts for me? And I was selling T-shirts, you know, late night at UMass or co-ed naked lacrosse for $10 a piece.
I have many of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he's like, I'd give you $1 a shirt. I was like, $1 a shirt? I might sell 50 shirts. That's amazing.
Right.
And I would meet people and they'd invite me in for drinks. And I'm a freshman going dorm to dorm, door to door, selling t-shirts. And I always had that hustle. I always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I've always worked. And I came from a good background. I'm not that guy. And I'm not going to sit here and say I grew up eating dirt, because I didn't. But you know what? I always just knew I had to do a little bit more. And that was just something that I try and instill in my kids. And it's worked with one or two of the three, but we're getting there. But so then I went out on my own. And you know what happened is I was doing it on my own and it was great. But then I actually started bumping into Jordan Bejant, Andrew Whitlieb in the marketplace. And we're like, why are we competing? And with their former ISI guys, we all work together. We're like, guys, why are we competing for the same business? Why don't we come together and see what we could form? So Pete Raskin joined us to sort of even out the two there and the two here, and then made four of us. At least it wasn't those two who had their existing business versus me. And then we formed the agency very creatively, because we couldn't agree on an adjective to precede agency.
Right.
And we formed the agency, and we did that for 8 years, and it was amazing, and it was so fun, and because it was ours. And we'd get $1 and we'd distribute a quarter a person, and it was
you
just
guys created a great environment in there too, though. That office felt great, and your styles, and I want to get more into kind of stylistically, because everybody sells very differently. You and Raskin sell very, very differently, and Jordan and Whitlieb sell very differently than the two of you too. But you guys created a really. I remember going in there right when I was at IMG, or when I started, like it felt exciting in there. It felt like ISI in there.
It was good, and humble beginnings, man. Working, we rented space from Ryan Shinman, and we were like in a converted dentist's office.
Yeah, but then you took real office space, and it wasn't humble beginnings. You were in like Grand Central, a really beautiful office.
Yeah, then we upgraded, and actually, that was Kenny Dichter and Jesse Itzler were sort of helping us out too. So it was like people always either took a shine to us, or people were benevolent or self-serving, saying, "Hey, these guys do well, it'll benefit me." Yeah. And people looked out for us, and we had these great opportunities to be around smart, successful people, which is something that you always try and do. And again, I do with my kids. When my kids want to go to the better college, it's like, you know what? The best people you could surround yourself with winners and successful people. It's going to work out well, hopefully. So we did that, and that was a great run. And then we ended up having an opportunity to merge, sell, whatever you want to call it. And then we took another shot, and we did that for a while, and the agency became the legacy agency. And then after a while, 5 years of that, Jordan went his direction, Peter went his direction, and Andrew and I stayed together, and we continue to build up this, which is now currently renamed as GSE after we took on new ownership. And, we've been doing that for, I don't even know, that's been almost 5 years now. And it's been an amazing run. So I still feel like entrepreneurial. And I tell people all the time, like, we are entrepreneurs. Nobody's telling me what to do, who to call, or how to go about it. And as you said, Lonnie, there's 100 different ways to sell. And your sales process has to be your sales process. Everyone in this industry has their own style, and it's a little personality, maybe a little what you read and what you see and what your talent or your property is that you're selling has to merge together. Yeah. But, personally for me, it's always been, I want to be the best conduit. I want to be the best one. Obviously I want to win. I want to maximize revenue for my clients, but it's also, this business keeps changing and evolving, and suddenly it's become, as it gets more, it's certainly not brain surgery, but as it becomes more nuanced and detailed, when you get into social media and, hey, I need this guy or this woman to post at 10 p.m., then I need a screenshot of analytics, and I'm going to need these 10 different levels to execute this program. What I've heard from people on the buy side is they really consider the representative almost as much as the talent nowadays. I don't know if you find that, but that's what I'm hearing from a lot of buyers. It's like we consider who's involved. Because if this agent is just not a good agent, or not really diligent or detailed or able to get their clients to do what's necessary, the buyers are going to look bad to their whoever they report to or themselves. So again, I try to be a really good conduit because I want that.
Yeah,
It's hard enough to get the first sale.
I agree.
Why do you want to work so hard? I'd rather keep doing business with the same people.
Yeah. So listen, there's a shitload of, as you were talking about kind of back in the eye, said, there's so much to unpack there. I think styles, for me, that's what really intrigues me about this podcast, this conversation. Because again, I think back to Rosner's style is drastically different than your style, which is drastically different than Pete's, which, and for me personally, it's taken me a while to be comfortable in my own selling skin and be comfortable in kind of what makes me good at what I do. Right. And listen, I think it's all a lot of learnings and a lot of failures and a lot of fuck ups and a lot of things that kind of over the years, I was like, man, if I really didn't just push there, or should have listened more there. I tell people all the time, my sales style is a punch you in the face sales style. Right. That's traditionally what I naturally feel. Right. Like I want to just blow into a room and sell you whatever the hell I've got. Right. My involvement, though, personally, has been to say, all right, let me understand you more. Right? Like I want to sell you something. Let me be very clear. I want to sell you something. But after you give me information, and after you give me knowledge, and after I learn more about you, if what I don't have, what I have doesn't make sense for you, I'm going to say, hey, it doesn't make sense for you. That took me a really long time to figure out because I'm so revenue driven. Right. I'm sure you got the same spreadsheet, the same way that Lowell does, Bryce Samuel does, and with the same stupid spreadsheet, how many deals and how much revenue we make. But it took me a really long time, even in my prospecting, right? I still prospect a lot, right? I never make assumptions on emails anymore, ever. I never say to an email, hey, I've got the perfect solution for you, because what the fuck do I know?
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't know anything about their business other than what I might have read in a press release. I don't have enough knowledge, enough information to be able to say I have the perfect solution. Maybe I do. I'm reaching out because I think I might, right? But before I'd be like, I've got the perfect solution for you. Here's the proposal. What do you think? It's like, well, what do I think? I think you don't know anything about me. Right? It's like you don't know anything about my business. You don't know anything about who I report to. You don't know anything about our objectives. You don't know enough to tell me you got something personal, right? Like perfect. So when I get those emails now, I'm like, I feel the same way. I was, well, you don't get tons of these emails. Like, yeah. And that to me is like where this never sell ice to Eskimos came into place, right? It's like you got to really be aware of who you're selling to, and how you learn that information is stylistically. Right. Like when I think about the gamut, I think you and me are probably more style wise similar. But there's been guys like Tom Worcester, who I think is probably one of the best sales guys I know. He was the guy that didn't do any of the work, walked into the room, was tall, was good looking, cracked a funny joke, and went golfing with somebody, and all of a sudden was closing deals. He was brilliant at it, like brilliant at it. Right. Raskin is a very different type of salesman. Right. Like he is for all the bullshit that he spews, right? He is funny, right? He is likable, and people have been doing business with him for a really, really long time, right? The same thing with you. And I think that's, to your point, shoving something down somebody's throat. Like it's not just about the sale today. It's about how do you build a relationship over the long term. People want to continue to do business with you, right? Because you can, that to me is how you build a book of business and build a business as a whole. And that's hard to, I think it's hard to teach, Russ, right? You were talking about ISI. I feel like, well, I know because I grew up under you in this business. I tell people all the time, the way that I learned to sell, the way that you learned to sell was, here's a phone book, here's our client list, go figure it out, right? Yeah. I think in a lot of ways it was the biggest blessing, and I think in a lot of ways it was the biggest curse, right? Because mentorship or teaching, like we didn't really get that, right? Like I got some of it from you, but I learned it by osmosis. Go make money, right? The curse to that is teaching other people how to do this shit is not, you either have it or you don't, right? And so I oftentimes wish like I went into this sales process and I went through a program so I could take that and teach it to other people.
Yeah.
My curse now is like, I expect everybody just to grab a phone and a phone book and our client list to go figure it out, but it's not really that easy.
No. And, You're right. And I say all these saying, look, I didn't grow up that way. I say, there's a phone,
Right.
there's a desk, there's a computer, go make money.
Right.
And, the same way, like I just sat in the wake of a few people that were ahead of me and I watched and I said, I want to take a little of that and a little of that. And I'm going to make my own little concoction. And that's kind of what I did and kind of what I encourage our young people today is like, look, you're fortunate and cursed that you have 10 bosses, but guess what? You have 10 bosses.
Yeah.
Take a little of them and then infuse yourself. And that's what you got to do. But I do, to your point, I guess one of the only things I do try and throw into their thinking is consider the person you're talking to. Sorry, we got the dogs barking here. We have rabbits and the dog. Anyway, and I'm just always like, you got to consider that this person you're calling at the local car wash, they're not thinking, how do I use athletes to drive business? But when you're talking to them, you gotta, before you pick up that phone and make that phone call or send the email or whatever, you have to think, who is the recipient on the other side and what is it that they're trying to accomplish today? Because I promise you, nobody woke up and said, how do I affiliate my car wash with this athlete? So you have to explain to them in that sales pitch, this is how and why I believe an athlete can effectively help you move the needle on your business. And that's what I'm trying to slow down. I appreciate young people that you want to run through walls, and that's great. I do too. And I want opportunities for my clients, but you got to think about the recipient on the other side because they're just thinking, how do I do more of X? How do I sell more of Y? And that's what you got to slow down. So the pre-call planning, right? You got to think for a second before you pick up that phone.
See, I didn't do that as a young kid. That took me a long time to figure out. There was a lot of wasteful time of just trying to throw everything against the wall and hopefully something sticks, right? Like you always want to fill the sales funnel, right? But filling the sales funnel just for the sake of filling the sales funnel is a fucking waste of time, right? You got to fill it with legitimate prospects, and it is all that pre-call planning or building. We used to say, oh, go build a client list in Baltimore for Tony Banks, and every single company in Baltimore, go figure out how to get something for Tony Banks. And I would go to the back then, I'd try to, we would buy an actual physical Baltimore Business Journal, and I would go in there to start calling, hey, who's your director of marketing? Who's your CMO? Who's your blah, 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 right? Yeah. Like before the internet, relatively speaking. But you realize that's a waste of time. Like it really was a waste of time. And with our information that you can get today, the internet allows you to do a lot of that. It takes time, but it eliminates a lot of that, right? It eliminates kind of targeting somebody that makes no sense, right? But that takes time, and I think it takes kind of desire to learn, right? Like desire to actually put yourself in their shoes. To your point, think about it from their perspective, and how can you actually help them? The idea is to get more people through the car wash. If your athlete can't get more people through the car wash, don't call the damn car wash. Right.
Unless you've got a solution to a problem that they don't even know they have, or an opportunity.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So that's what we're trying to instill and trying to get people to think about, but it's hard. It's really, and the business has gotten harder and harder and more complicated. And there's a lot of different things that everyone's trying to accomplish now. When you have, social media has just changed our business so much too. Yeah. The top of the mountain in the athlete marketing space used to be the national TV commercial. And, in the beginning of social media, people were like, oh, it's just a social media campaign. Guess what? That's an endorsement. That's a full-blown deal. Call it what you want. But like the goal and the target has changed a lot these days. And
a TV deal is almost more, it's almost more valuable to the athlete than it is to the brand if you're putting them on a national spot and blowing it out, right? Like you're getting them more exposure. Listen, you see Jason Tatum doing these, I think they're Ruffles commercials, whatever they are right now. That's a great spot for him. Like he has not been thrust onto the national scene yet. If I'm that chip brand, I'm talking to his agent. As much as that agent wants to say, well, you got to pay me to be on national TV, my response would be like, dude, I'm about to put your client in a branded spot on national television during the NBA finals. Nobody, not that nobody knows who Tatum is right now, because he's obviously amazing. Putting him into a different sphere to be considered for all these other spots.
It's great. It certainly that, yes, it's still top of the food chain, but there's a lot of different tops of the food chain. Let's put it that way. And I've had that too, for sure. Like, as you know, Nick Mangold is one of my guys, near and dear to my heart, one of my favorites. He's an offensive lineman, right? But like, we did have that. We were fortunate enough to get him in a Bud Light Seltzer national TV spot. And to your point, that specific spot led to another opportunity. Someone called me, wow, I didn't know Nick was funny. I didn't know Nick was this. It led to a TV opportunity. And it was, frankly, it was someone that I was cold calling for a while that wasn't that receptive. Right. And then suddenly they saw the spot, picked up the phone and called me, and we had a deal done within a week. That was a direct result of that national TV spot.
Yeah.
And there's many of those examples. So yeah, we still love them. There's definitely mutual benefit.
Yeah. Let me ask you, just think through kind of your career. And I think a lot about my mistakes, right? Like I think a lot about the things I took shots on and were massive failures, but I learned so much from, right? Like that 50-yard line event, you know, during Super Bowl in New York, man, that was, it was the biggest disaster, but it was definitely probably one of my biggest failures. And I probably learned more from that year of trying to pull off this event than anything else, right? What are those things for you, kind of, as you look back the, 20 plus years you've been doing this, you're like, man, that was a royal fuck up, but I learned so much from it.
Wow.
Do you have those?
I mean, I'm sure I have plenty, and I have a lot of disasters, and I got a lot of chapters to write in a book that I'm never going to write. But there's many. Look, I've had a lot of wild bucks that I've represented and worked with, guys that have come on to just calm down. But when you get them as rookies, I mean, look, I had Ndamukong Suh for the first 5 years of his career. I had Jameis Winston for the first 5 years of his career, and great guy, great opportunities, and we did a lot of great things. But God, there were some wild times, and leaving the Thanksgiving table to have conversations with the Lions PR staff and stuff. But like, in terms of like career fuck ups, I don't know. I love what I do, and I don't have a lot of regrets. Regrets in my life might be more real estate transactions I didn't do, buying buying a minivan when we should have been buying a sports car, and then different things like that. Yeah. But I don't regret my career in any sense, but I do look at like, well, maybe I should have been on field. I'm in football. I'm in this space. I know it well. So instead of chasing nickels for appearance and endorsements, why shouldn't I be chasing hundreds of millions of dollars?
I think that the same way, by the way. For years, I've thought about that too.
That's the only, if I have a regret, it's like, that's maybe the only one where I'd like, maybe there was just a higher calling for me or a bigger path. Like, I'm in the business, but
I mean mistakes, right? Things where you were like, man, I shouldn't have sent that proposal this way, or I sold too hard this way, or I took a shot on this kind of business thing and it didn't work for these. I don't, by the way, I don't ever have regrets on doing 50-yard lunge ever, right? It took a year of my life and it was wildly difficult, and I don't regret it for a second. It was a massive mistake. I opened up Lobster Press, with Fort Gion inside the World Trade Center, inside Pennsy. Massive mistake. I don't regret it, right? Like, because I learned so much from that process, right? I think that, and this is just me, I kind of take bigger shots, right? I think I admire you because you stay within your talent marketing world. Like for me, I don't know, I get really bored, right? So, trying to open up a, fast casual lobster concept with a client of mine sounded like a really brilliant idea at the time, or, doing a lounge during the Super Bowl across the street from Madison Square Garden in sub-zero weather, popping up. That sounded like a great idea to me at the time. And neither of them obviously were, right? But any of those, and I guess even if they're not, like,
I don't know, man. I mean, my regrets are more like deal specific. Like, God, I wish that Starberry didn't, I wish Stephen Barry's didn't go so aggressive. I should have been retired. We all should have been retired on Starberry.
Right.
Just Stephen Barry's got really aggressive and overly expanded and stuff, and he's crazy. And like, that was like an unbelievably, game changing deal. And really Jordan and Peter were driving that one, but like that should have been my retirement. And, I
Right.
should be done already, but it didn't sustain itself. I don't know. I apologize, but like off the top of my head, I don't have like, this was a fuck up. Like this is something I really did wrong. And I'm not trying to be arrogant. I've made
No,
plenty of
I
mistakes,
guess.
but there might be more like deal, or I said this to someone. Look, Super Bowl, for those that know me well, Super Bowl 43 was my last drink. I haven't had alcohol since Super Bowl 43. And all I could say is that night, that could have been career ending. And I just, that could have been the night. And I'm fortunate to be alive, and I'm fortunate to not have been arrested. And I'm fortunate not to have found a lot of people I was looking for that day to tell them what I thought of them.
Right, right.
So I
Well,
think,
that to me is a perfect example, right? Because I do think, at least in our industries, right? Being aware of the moment that you're in, right, and making sure that you surround yourself with some of the right people and not going over the top, right? Being, again, especially with the phone these days, and especially with the way things are
well, and I
communicated.
had a phone.
And
That
it's
wasn't for lack of effort. I was born under a lucky star, and there was
yeah,
something looking out for me that night. But there were a lot of, and I always said, like, if these things start intersecting with your business and then the stakes were higher for me, because then I
right,
was a
right,
little bit older, and then I had multiple kids, and then I had a house, and I had cars, and I had like things to think about, and the
yeah,
stakes
yeah,
got too high. And I said, what the hell am I doing here? Where's your priority? Like, you got to work, man. And you can't like, that was the biggest stage in the world. And I really set out to self-destruct,
right.
It's just, so that's the only, thing that's jumping in my mind right now. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things. I know there's plenty of things I could have done or said something differently.
Yeah,
Um, just trying, man. I'm trying hard.
yeah,
I continue to try hard every day. And I really do sincerely. I care about my clients. I care about our business. I care about my colleagues. I care about my family tremendously. And I'm just trying to represent myself and represent them well. And I think we're a reflection of one another. And that's where
yeah,
back to this, and this is not my sober journey, but this is back to where it's like, if I'm out in a club at Super Bowl at 2 a.m, hammered and slurring, am I really representing you well? Like, because we're connected. The
true.
athletes we represent, we're connected. So
Very
I
true.
just felt, for me, that was something that I decided was not worth it. And I
Yeah,
miss. There's a lot of people, like you said before about Tom, like the people that really just do that unbelievable. There's people in our industry that are titans of our industry that do that really well, and they go out and they party with clients. They're the life of the party, and God bless. And they do it really well. Some people are better at it than
and
others.
they
And that's
wake up in the morning like nothing happened.
nothing. And you know
Perfect,
what?
ready
And
to
that's
kill the
what
day again. Yep.
I just had to find my style. That wasn't my style. I wasn't good at it. Some people are
Yeah, yeah.
great at it. I wasn't. So I've actually tried. So my thing, like I try and do, I'll go exercise with a client because I'm not going to go out and get drunk with them. So that's how
Right.
I'm trying to build relationships. Hey, let's go for a run. Let's go for a hike. We're in Arizona for Super Bowl. You guys want to go for a hike?
Yeah.
Frank Mahar and I, we joke around, but every time I see him in Vegas, we're going for a run together.
Which is amazing. We had dinner the other night. I thought you guys were joking. You actually woke up and actually went for a run
Woke
together.
up going for a run because that's what I have. You got to use, I'm Johnny cliche, but you got to use the arrows in your quiver. And that's what I got. Cause I'm not the guy. I can't go out and get drunk with you anymore.
Yeah.
I'll still go out and watch you get drunk, but it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's definitely not as fun watching other people get drunk.
No.
Let me ask you, just because I want to, first of all, I love this, right? I could sit here and talk to you all day long. Like, I really do. Like, for me,
but people will stop listening at some point.
Exactly. So when you think about what you want to pass on to other people from a sales perspective, right? Like I always want to, again, this is our first episode of doing this, but I want to try to pass on, like, what are those tips that you want to give the young kids? Because maybe they're not going to be able to be in the office, or maybe they're not going to be able to have somebody that's helping them along this journey, or maybe they just want to do it on their own because, I don't know, man, social media stars are doing shit on their own and they're trying to figure out how to sell stuff. Like, what are those kind of tips you want to give to people? Maybe a couple of them that kind of you think can help along their journey.
We touched on some, but one is really consider the person on the other side of the phone. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? How can your product, your commodity, benefit them or help them increase their business, you got to take a minute to step back and think.
Right.
Again, I think trying to be that good conduit, and like you said too, not jamming something down their throat. You got to be able to walk away and just say, you know what, I'm not right for this one. I can't help you. Or look, I would love to help you, but you should talk to my friend. He or she is a better person that could do this. And you and
Right.
I personally have done that. Like,
We
hey,
have.
you know what? I'm not in the cooking space. I'm not in the culinary space. Talk to Lonnie. He's an expert over there. And I think being mature enough and willing to walk away is a great skill too. And it's
Agreed.
just, really considering that person, staying true to yourself. And then there's also just things too, you know, I know people use a lot of HubSpot and Salesforce and different software too, but relying on technology to help you. I use my calendar constantly for follow-up reminders. I'm a big, I delay emails all the time because I don't need everyone. You send someone an email just because I'm a loser sitting home on a Saturday night doesn't mean that the recipient on the other side. So I might write that email watching the game on Saturday night if I'm doing nothing, but I'll hold it. I'll put it in my drafts. I'll delay delivery. I use my calendar reminder, follow up with this person. I send myself, notes and things to just stay on top of it. You got to have a lot of things out there, a lot of fires in the oven, especially us, our business, your business, anything in the talent space, you could always be doing more for somebody. You're
Yeah.
never sold out. So I want to try and remember everything I can. And, you're driving down the road, you see a billboard, I'm writing it down and just trying to use the technology and the powerful rocket ship you got in your hand.
Dude, I do the same damn thing, which
Yeah.
is what I wonder. My fear is that because it's so easy, right? Those small things, like, listen, I've got one of these magazines right here that I started, one of the Bone apps and one of the Food and Wine magazines. I'm tearing out pages and I'm literally putting them on my desk so I can follow up with those brands. And it's going through the magazines instead of just because you can't get that online. Banner ads are not the same thing as a physical ad in the paper that you can rip out. And
immerse yourself in your industry too. That's the thing too. Like, you're watching the game, watch the game. That's great. But really look at what's going on in the stands, not just, what's going on the court, on the ice, on the field. It's
blessing
about
in disguise as well, right? By the way, like I'm 100% with you. When I first started in this industry, by the way, I have another mistake that I think you'll appreciate and probably remember that has stuck with me literally for 20 years. But going to games, like I have a hard time not doing that. And when I just want to focus on the game and looking at everything. But real quickly, just because I think about this all the time, and it really had like a really indelible effect on my life, my career. You took me to a meeting with Kit Geis and Frank Mahar at Genesco Sports in Connecticut years ago. I think it was one of the first meetings you ever took me to. And Genesco was representing Pepsi at the time. And I'm a Diet Coke drinker. And they took us out to lunch. And I'm so mad at myself, like to this day. They took us out to lunch, and Kit was like, I don't know, maybe she was the VP, and Frank was just getting started there. It wasn't whatever. And they all ordered. I was like, I'll take my burger and I'll have a Diet Coke. And I was like the word came out of my mouth, and I was like, I am so sorry. I was like, in that moment, it was one of those realizations that like, I've got to be better. I got to be more thoughtful. This is the agency that you can get fired for walking through an airport if you've got anything Coke related on your thing, right? So that was the moment to me where, and I remember walking into the Jets facility, a couple of years ago, and I had a Diet Coke, and I took the outside off because they were a Pepsi facility. Right, those moments where you have to be aware of your surroundings, and that was like, I'll never forget it ever for the rest of my life. Because I remember you looking at me and be like, "Are you some kind of fucking asshole that I just brought you to this meeting with this agency?" And they represented a lot of brands at that time. And like, hey, schmuck, like be smart enough even at your young age to like realize the moment that you're in.
Know your audience, man. It's that simple. You got to know your audience.
And I've told Frank the story, which, again, I think what's amazing is that you can maintain those relationships. Frank Mahar for 25 plus years. I've known Frank for a long time. I don't really do business with Frank ever. I can't remember the last deal that Frank brought me, right? But I still call him. It's still not necessarily about closing deals. It's about, hey, let's catch up. Let me learn about what you're doing. Maybe there is something we can be doing together. I'm not seeking out to fleece him. I'm calling out to learn about what he's got going on. And I can pick his brain and say, hey, Pepsi, are they doing anything at Super Bowl? I know you got a lot of NFL clients and we represent chefs. Like, what are they doing? And he's always open and honest. And he knows comfortable enough to be like, dude, I got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Right? Which I appreciate more than anything, because I'm not wasting my time either.
It's a great sign of maturity for you.
Yeah, I think so too. I do think the relationships I do that I think that we take for granted, I think is vital. Right, like those are the things back in the days where when we were at SFX and we were in the Candler building, and I remember sitting in my office, and I remember Peter, or somebody they were about to go to a meeting, and it was with a CMO or it was whoever it was, and I was like, how the hell are they able to get these meetings with CMOs and VPs of marketing? Because I was like calling account managers and blah blah blah. And I realized 15 years later, and it really is because of everybody that I was surrounded with. Like, the people you maintain relationships, that assistant becomes a director and then becomes a VP, and they grow up, right? Like, never to realize there's nobody too small, right? Nobody too, like, everybody is somebody, and they grow up, right?
They're all in this business already.
100%.
So treat them well. You never know where they're going to go. Absolutely. And it's hard too, but you got to do it.
I agree.
You should do it self-servingly and just as a
human to human reason. Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, I love this, and I appreciate you. And you're my guinea pig for this Never Sell Ice to Eskimos podcast that I'm now, as I'm talking to you, thinking about when this is going to launch. So, man, I appreciate you, and I really do love you, Russ. And I thank you for your friendship and your mentorship, and for hiring me years ago too.
Awesome. Thank you for including me. You never forget your first.
That's right, bud.
This will be a trivia question one day.
Hit them straight, dude. Hit them straight this afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks, buddy.